The reason, the rhyme. 5 things that are important to me and the reason why. First up, albums. Album number 1. The Smiths, Hatful of Hollow. This particular record I only bought a couple of months ago, but the original one that I did have, I bought in 1985 from Probe Records on Matthew Street in Liverpool. My daughter borrowed it, so I've seen the last of that, but I do still have that sort of in my possession. The reason why this is so important to me is because in 1985, when we moved back to England from the Netherlands, it's one of the first albums that I bought. I loved How Soon Is Now. I remember seeing that on Top of the Pops over in Enschede. I thought it was amazing. So I thought I'll buy the album when I get home. I'll buy that album, and I did. And I loved it. It's one of my favourite headphones albums. If you've not heard this album on vinyl, on headphones, you are missing out, genuinely. How Soon Is Now with headphones on is an absolute treat. But also, as I say, we moved back to England in 1985. And now I wasn't a nerd or a geek or anything, but I was in the top set for everything at school. I had friends outside of school who were not academically smart, but very, very street smart. And the Smiths, to me, made it acceptable to be intelligent, to not hide the fact that you were smart. I loved the idea of Morrissey with the kitchen sink drama and the poetry over, well, the rhythm section I think is as good as you're going to get. It's so tight, absolutely solid. And on top of that, Johnny Marr weaving his magic with those really pretty, fairly clean guitar tones, which I always thought, some of them are quite upbeat as well, and sort of, I don't know, like the Searchers. You're expecting sugar and spice and all things nice, or every time that you walk in the room, needles and pins, and instead what you get? Punctured bicycle on a hillside desolate. I think that's absolutely superb, that juxtaposition. People think the Smiths are miserable, they're not. I am convinced that Morrissey deliberately played on the fact that it was all upbeat, chimey guitars with him sounding miserable. I'm sure it's tongue-in-cheek, it really is. But to me, I just found it, at that age, at the age of 12, 13, 14, 15, allowing myself to write poetry and to not be ashamed of the fact that I did it. When I started playing guitar, don't be ashamed of being a guitarist. Don't be ashamed of being smart. Embrace it. So that album started it, and to this day I am still hugely influenced by the style of lyrics, the approach to songwriting, the approach to poetry, to storytelling. I have used pretty much throughout my life. I still use it to this day. The Beatles did it, of course, when you think of things like A Day in the Life, She's Leaving Home. These little stories, all encapsulated in 3 minutes or whatever it is. These were the first band that were around when I was around who used that same kind of style. I suppose Madness and Ian Dury did as well, and I use that as an influence as well. Ian Dury especially. But these were the first ones that, it was an entire package. And it's still to this day, if you play this album, and it's absolutely superb. Look at how many fantastic songs are on this. I love it. It's another album that is going to stay with me. I had to rebuy this one because Jess has got my other one, but I made sure that I've still got it on vinyl, and I'm happy that she's got it as well. And there's been a couple of times when I've been in the car with her and her mates, picking them up from going out or off somewhere, and I've had the Smiths playing through Spotify, and the girls have been singing along, knowing every single word. That makes me proud, really does. Anyway, that was number 1, the Smiths, Hatful of Hollow. Album number 2, Throwing Muses, Hunk Papa. Now this is an album that, again, I bought that from, I am thinking maybe HMV in Liverpool, back when it came out in the late 80s. And the reason why it's important to me is back then, 89, 90, I was very much listening to loads of British music, not a huge amount of American stuff. Although we did start getting into a little bit of R.E.M, Replacements, Trip Shakespeare and things like that. It was that album, Throwing Muses, that really woke me up to the fact that I shouldn't just keep on listening to British music. There's more to it. There's more to life than just where you live, isn't there? A lot of the American stuff I just couldn't get to grips with at all. There was nothing that connected me to it. And I don't suppose there should be with Throwing Muses as well, but there's something about Kristin Hersh's voice which speaks to me. I don't know why. I don't know on which level it speaks to me, but it just does. It's similar to like Peter Gabriel does the same thing for me, and a few other, John Lennon as well. There's an earthiness to it. And I'm probably completely wrong in the way I look at this, but Kristin Hersh's voice always reminded me as though she was walking barefoot through grass. You could feel the soil coming through her as she sang. And it's something that has, again, stuck with me ever since. I love the way she sounds. And like Peter Gabriel, if you listen to the beginning of Looking for Someone on Genesis, what was the first album? Sorry, second album, I can't even remember now. Trespass. His voice there, just the exact same thing, and that's what it is, that spoke to me. And on vinyl, it sounds absolutely amazing, Hunk Papa. Loads of good songs. There's an incredible thing that they used to do, which I think they probably still do to this day, is the drummer, David Narciso, I hope I'm saying that right by the way, doesn't use cymbals. So you haven't got loads of big crash and ride cymbals. It means that the drums are not as expansive as some other drummers. They're a bit more claustrophobic, and I feel it gives it a better feeling. It makes it feel a bit more like, I don't know, as though someone's whispering you a secret. It's a bit more just you and them. I don't know, it's hard to explain, but that's what I love that sound. Give them a listen. You don't realise it until someone points out they don't use cymbals, at which point you think, yeah, actually they don't. This is weird. It's not weird, it's brilliant. Just a different way of playing music, I suppose. But it's an absolutely superb album. All their stuff's great anyway, and Kristin Hersh then went on to make Hips and Makers, which is a really pared back album. Mainly acoustic guitar, a little bit of strings and vocals, pretty much it. And it really comes through on that. But for me, the genesis in that came from Hunk Papa. That's where I first got to get that little bit of a hook. That's what dragged me in to begin with. But yeah, I absolutely love that album. Give it a go if you haven't tried it already. Album number 3 is The Stone Roses by The Stone Roses. Now this actual piece of vinyl I only bought 2 or 3 months ago. I've got the CD in the car, I've got the cassette in the house somewhere, and it's took me a long time to get the vinyl. I have got, or did have, almost everything, all of the singles on 12-inch vinyl, but people have borrowed them over the years and never brought them back. So I've got a few of them, but not all. The reason why this is such an important album to me, I think, is this is the first band where it really felt like it was our band, if that makes any sense. Now, I grew up listening to the Beatles. I didn't grow up with the Beatles. My parents were teenagers in Liverpool in the 1960s. They grew up with the Beatles. But I was 16 when this came out. So I was almost on the cusp of adulthood. And this felt like the first time that something was happening that belonged to us, to my generation, to the people I went to school with, not just my uncles, not just the adults in the room. It felt like ours. From the cover, splatter paint cover, designed by John Squire, to bouncing around the BBC studio shouting amateurs because the power went halfway through a performance, to pouring paint over the cars of the former record company executives. There was a swagger, not just to the Stone Roses, to the whole Manchester scene. And I remember there was an episode of Top of the Pops where there was the Stone Roses playing Fool's Gold, Happy Mondays playing Hallelujah, and it was massive. Up until then, I mean, remember what 1989 was like? It was absolutely, the charts were infected by Stock Aitken and Waterman, copy and paste, dance pop. That was it, that's all you had. There was some acid house, Chicago acid house, but that was underground. So occasionally there'd be a little bit of a crossover, but apart from that, there was nothing. Then all of a sudden, a load of swaggering working class northerners turned up. Not just the Stone Roses, the Happy Mondays, the Charlatans, Northside, in spiral carpets, new fast automatic daffodils. That proper Manchester scene. They will all tell you they were influenced by the Smiths, but none of them sounded like the Smiths. It was looser, baggier, more rhythm to it. So it was connecting dance to the indie that went before it, and also acted like a bridge to what was to come that we didn't realise at the time. We had the indie of the mid-80s of the Smiths and people like that. Then we had the Britpop of the mid-90s, Manchester and the bands that were around at that point, and I will include the Lars and people like that at that point. Even though the Lars come out in 1990, this was 1989. Two of the greatest debut albums in history, I would say. And both eponymous as well. Both named after the band. But it needed something, and they were that was what it was. It was Manchester. It was Joe Bloggs, Jeans. It was the whole vibe, and we needed it. We had Spike Island. The concert was in 1990. I was at that one. The Woollyback Woodstock. There was a band on that had 3 bass players, because, you know, why not? Frankie Bones from Brooklyn, New York, as he kept on saying, was the DJ. It was great, and it felt like something. It felt like a youth movement. We needed it. And it started with this for me. And when I talk about the swagger, I mean, come on, debut album. First song is I Want to Be Adored. And the last song is I Am the Resurrection. Can you get any more swagger than that? Album number 4. Bit of a giveaway here. It is Close to the Edge by Yes. I bought this from Backtracks in Liverpool. Just around the corner from Probe. When we first moved back to England in 1985, I was too scared to buy anything in Probe because, well, the likes of Pete Burns used to work there, from Dead or Alive, and if you didn't like the music that you picked, he threw it across the room. So we go to Backtracks and buy second-hand records. This is a second-hand record, and it was probably the first one of my prog odyssey. I never really knew much about prog until we moved back to England, and I went to school. I was lucky enough to be in school with a load of lads who were really into the music, and heavily into prog as well. So I had my introduction, a few little tapes were given to me, like Genesis, yes, a few things like that. No Van de Graaff generator at that point. Nobody is ready for that, not until you've really served your time. But I think it was this album and the title track, Close to the Edge, that I just couldn't believe. I could not believe music could be like that. I'd come from being sort of age of 4 in 1977, listening to my uncle's punk, ska, new wave songs, things that were 2.5 minutes long, full of aggression, to suddenly hearing this 20 odd minute dreamy song of hope, love, hope and inspiration. Absolutely incredible. The musicianship is off the scale. It's got what people would consider the classic lineup from Yes of John Anderson, Chris Squire, Steve Howe, Bill Bruford and Rick Wakeman. And they are all absolutely at the top of their game on this album. Absolutely superb. It was the artwork as well. I'd never seen anything like it. Roger Dean artwork, Roger Dean covers. Absolutely superb. Each one telling their own little tale. You don't really get that with punk, do you? You don't. But it was, at the time I was learning guitar as well, and I thought I was Steve Howe. I still do. I can't play anywhere near as well as him. Not a chance, I never will be able to, but I could do a little bit. And every time I nailed a bit of Steve Howe guitar playing, I was absolutely ecstatic. And this, I bought this in 1985. I have listened to this album over and over and over again. I am surprised there's still any meat left on the album. And unfortunately, it was a pathway, like I say, to Genesis, King Crimson, Van der Graaf Generator, ELP, Rush, all those prog bands, although Rush are a bit more a layer of rock and roll with fantasy on top. Still prog, but not quite as nymphs and spirits as Yes. But it was that album that I think made me realise that you can push further. Don't just settle. Don't settle for what you can do. Don't settle for being a pub band. Push yourself and push the limits of what you are capable of. Which is why I probably like sort of the likes of Radiohead and bands like that nowadays. They do the same kind of thing. The Beatles did as well. Every one of them could have just carried on doing what they were doing, but instead, what did they do? Push, push, push. Some people said they pushed too far. Yes. Especially with Tales from Topographic Oceans, but that's another album I listen to quite a lot as well. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It can be a bit pretentious, but at least they were trying. That's the whole point of it. Don't settle for second best. Don't settle for mediocrity. Absolutely smash it out the park now and then. And they did with that. Absolutely. In fact, I might even listen to that tonight. I would get my guitar out and show you how good I am, but obviously my left hand's not working. That's the only reason why I can't show you how fantastic I am, honest. And number 5, which is also number 1, is Welcome to the Pleasure Dome by Frankie Goes to Hollywood. You're probably thinking, what do I mean? It's number 5 and also number 1. Well, it was the first album I ever bought. I bought it from a record shop in Enschede in the Netherlands back in 1984. And what was important about it, it's not just the fact that it was my first ever album. I had and still have Relax and Two Tribes on 7-inch single. I had plenty of singles back then. This was the first time I'd ever gone from buying the singles to buying the album, and it felt like a step forward. I was 11 at the time, so all of a sudden I was a big boy, and that step forward, I think, was the thing that made me then not just someone who listened to music, but a music collector. It meant I wasn't just borrowing my uncle's albums anymore. I had my own. It was a proto collection. Because after this, I started getting bought albums for Christmas. When people were struggling what to get me, all of a sudden they knew what I wanted. More music and more and more and more. This album every time I listen to it, and I have done loads of times since, reminds me of being in that room in the Netherlands, in Enschede, in Vicherlanden, number 18, if anyone wants to go and see the blue plaque on the wall, which should be there. I'm taken right back there. I think that's one of the main things you can say about music, is it's almost as good as smells in bringing back memories, and that always does, and I always love it for that. It was, of course, produced by the absolute genius that is Trevor Horn, a man who would later go on to produce Yes, 90125 and Owner of a Lonely Heart. He was also in Yes. I didn't realise this until much later on. All I knew at the time was I loved the way it sounded, as many of his songs sounded absolutely incredible. It was like nothing else I'd heard. The bass, all this predates, of course, it was 1983-84, all them songs came out, and it predates house music coming to the UK, but just sort of, I don't know, was it the prototype? Is that where it came from? I don't think so. That was shit, we're going to cut this bit out. I had to stop then, I was in danger of looking like Chris Martin from Coldplay. Nobody needs that. Not even Chris Martin from Coldplay. This is the British Lawnmower Museum. That has got absolutely nothing to do with what we were talking about, but I thought I'd show you. And if you go and listen to it now, it still sounds good, it still sounds fresh. And I don't know if that's down to the quality of the songwriting. The quality, the undoubted quality of Trevor Horn's production, the themes of the songs, or a combination of all three. But I think they made a bit of a masterpiece. It's both of its time and timeless at the same time, and that takes a bit of doing. So it's an album I will always listen to, and it's one I'm not going to throw away, sell, trade or give to anyone, so it will always be there. Well, there you go. That's my 5 albums. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like what you see, just keep an eye on the channel. There will be more. I'll see you next time. For the time being, my name's Nick. That was the reason, and that was the rhyme.